Hello and welcome to one and all. In today's class, we'll check out what are the trends as well as the size in the growth rate of population in India. In the previous class, I have explained about the theory of demographic transition. That is how the birth and death rate changes and how it reflects on the size of population in a particular country. So I mentioned to you that there are three stages in the theory of demographic transition. And I also mentioned from which stage, which year to which year India is in the first stage and which year India entered into the second stage. So now in this class, we will check out with the data exactly what was the growth rate of population, how the size and growth rate of population changed in India over a period of time. Okay. So actually, everybody knows that India is the second most populated country in the world today. So some of the characteristic features of Indian population. So India today possesses 2.4% of the geographical area of the world, with around 17.6% of world's population. So that's why the density of population is very high in our country. So 17.6% of the world's population, but sharing only 2.4% of the geographical area of the world, and around 7.3% of world GDP. This is as per the 2017 data. Now we can understand why the per capita income of India is low. Okay. Now this is the current situation. So let us check out now with the data over a period of time, how the size of population and the growth rate of population changed over a period of time. Okay. So before moving into that, explaining about that, see the growth rate of population. How do we calculate the growth rate of population? It depends upon the birth rate and death rate. Depends upon birth rate and death rate. So now what is the meaning of birth rate? So birth rate is the in a given locality, out of what is the total number of live births per the number of people in that particular locality. Basically, it is calculated in the mid-year. Mid-year, what is the total population of a particular locality, and what are the how many are the live births in that particular locality, and which is multiplied by 1,000. So that's why the birth rate is being calculated. So birth rate, simply put it, ratio of number of births per 1,000 population in a year. So that is to put it more detailedly. So it is so normally we say crude birth rate and crude death rate. Okay. So crude birth rate is the number of resident live births for a specified locality, state or country or region. So specified geographical locality area. So specified geographical area. I mean, you can mention, as I mentioned, it can be a nation, it can be a particular state in a country, or it can be a country in a world, etc. Okay, during a specified period. Normally, we calculate all these data in what do you say, per year, so which is called as the calendar year. Usually, calendar year, which is divided by the total population in that particular locality. And normally all these are calculated during the mid-year. What is the population of the particular locality in the mid-year of that calendar year. Okay. Even the per capita income are all we are calculating based on the national income divided by population is per capita income, isn't it? So that population is the data is calculated during the whatever the population of that particular locality in that mid-year. For that area multiplied by 1000. I think this will give you better information. So this is how the birth rate, or in the same way the death rate is also calculated. So if you have to put it in the formula, form of a formula, crude birth rate is equal to total resident, that is the live births, divided by total population, which is calculated during the mid-year, which is multiplied by 1000. So this is how the birth rate is being calculated. So this is the anyway ratio. This is what we call it, the ratio of number of births per 1000 population in a year. Okay. So this is how we are calculating the birth rate. In the same way, the death rate will be death rate. So it is ratio of number of deaths per 1000 population in a year. So formula will be crude death rate is equal to total number of deaths divided by total population. As I mentioned, it's again mid-year, that is multiplied by 1000. Okay, so this is how the death rate is being calculated. So the difference, you based on this, you will get the what is the birth rate and death rate per 1000 in a particular locality, in a particular country, in a particular state. And the difference between the birth and the death rate will be the growth rate of population. Okay, so let us take a small numerical examples. See, for example, 100,000 live, if a particular locality is having a 100,000 live births in a calendar year, let us take it as 2010 among state residents, particular whatever that particular is, the total residents or the that is the estimated population. So estimated population, let us assume this is the estimated population. Okay, so 100,000 among this estimated population. So how do we calculate? So what do we get here? So 100,000 divided by 2000, you are getting 10 live births per 1000 population. Okay, so this is just an example. So this is how we are calculating the birth rate. In the same way, we have calculated the death rate also. So difference will be the growth rate of population. Suppose if you are getting the death rate as 5 per 1000, then the growth rate of population in that particular locality will be 5. So this is how the birth rate and death rate is being calculated. Okay. Now moving on to the as far as India's trends in the growth rate of population. Or size of population. So basically, India has undergone 4 phases of growth rate in the population. So the first phase. So the first phase was between 1891 to 1921. So during this 30-year period, 1921. So during this 30 years period, so India's population increased from 236 million to 251 million. So an addition of plus 15 million. So remember, 15 million in 30 years, that is 1891 to 1921. So during this period, the birth rate of India was 49.2 per thousand. So when I'm saying we are normally calculate the last year. What is it? That is in 1921. Okay. So this birth rate and death rate, this is the 1921. So 1921 birth rate was 49.2 per thousand and death rate equally matched 48.6 per thousand same year. And the growth rate, the compound growth rate in terms of percentages. So these are all in per thousand. So the compound growth rate happened to be 0.19%. Okay. So now this India is in the first phase because we did not have the problem of high growth rate of population, alarming population, because high birth rate is equally compensated by high death rate. So at this point of time, India is in the first phase, that is, what do you say, the growth rate of the first stage of demographic transition. So growth rate of population was checked or controlled, or to put it very, and it's not basically controlled because of so many problems. The death rate also happened to be high, and anyway, we did not have the problem of population explosion. So clearly, due to high death rate matching the high birth rate. So during this period of time, so this phase in 1891 and 1921, India was in the first stage of demographic transition. Okay, so the previous class I mentioned about the what are the first stage and what were the India's stage, what were all the causes and all, isn't it? So this was the to prove it with the data. So this was the data of birth rate and death rate. Okay, so now this was up to 1921. Now let us see what happened to the growth rate of population the next 30 years. So then we moved on to the second phase, that was between 1921 to 1951. So here also the 30 years, the next 30 years, the population increased, the size of population increased from 1921, it was 251 million, isn't it? So 251 million to 361 million. So you can see additional 110 million. So this was the growth rate during the next 30 years. So during this period, the birth rate of the country, I mean, in 1921, it was 49.2 per thousand. So from 49.2 per thousand, the birth rate decreased to 39.9 per thousand. As I mentioned, this is the last year, this is a 1951. And death rate decreased from 48.6% to 27.4 per thousand. So you can clearly see the fall in the death rate is quite considerable, was quite considerable compared to the fall in the birth rate of the country, isn't it? So still, even in this second phase also, still the growth rate of population is not that much terrifying. I mean, but it clearly shows that India has entered into the second stage of demographic transition. Okay, so still India's, I mean, uh, how we are saying the growth rate is low because you have to mention the compound growth rate. So compound growth rate during this period was 1.22%. So this is what we are saying, that because of this reason, it is said that India's growth rate is not that much alarming because it's still just slightly above 1%. Okay, but it is already proving that in the growth rate is going to increase, and India has clearly entered into the second stage of demographic transition. So this shows still the growth rate of population was low, but clear signs that India entered into the second stage of demographic transition. So that's why this 1921 happens to be the great dividing year. Okay, so this is the second phase of population growth in our country. And then moving on to the third phase. Third one. Third phase was between 1951 to 1981, 30 years. The next 30 years, the population increased from 361 million to 683 million. So how much is the addition? Plus 322 million, almost the double of the previous phase. Okay, and the birth rate during this period of time was 37.2 per thousand. Now you can understand. So again, as I mentioned, this is the 1981 figures. So it was 39.9 per thousand in 1951, which has decreased only to 37.2 per thousand. It's a very, very marginal decrease in the birth rate. But compared to that, the death rate decreased considerably to 15.0 per thousand. So this was the reason for the second stage of demographic transition. So in the previous class, I mentioned to you what were the reasons for high birth rate and what were the reasons for the decrease in the death rate of the country. Because as the country develops, the economic development takes place, the health facilities in the country increases, and most of the epidemics, I mean most of the diseases and all, the country would have found the cure. So the death rate and drinking water, sanitation, all those facilities must have improved. So the death rate considerably decreased, but then because of the attitude of the people, the birth rate still continued to be high. So this was again in 1921. So the compound growth rate of population was somewhere around, this is 2.114%. This is the record growth rate. Highest amount of growth rate witnessed by India so far. This was the during this period of time. Okay, the 2.14%. So India. So now what you can say, India was well into the second stage of demographic transition. So this is experiencing what the economists call as the experiencing something called as population explosion. Okay, so this is the highest growth rate of population India has ever witnessed. Okay, so we are well into the second stage of demographic transition, experiencing that alarming population, which is economists normally call it as the population explosion. And then after that, slowly the growth rate started decreasing because of the efforts made by the country. So we went to the, we moved from third phase to the fourth phase. So the fourth phase from 1981 to 2011, the next 30 years. So the population increased from 683 million in 1981 to 1,210 million. So additional 527 million. Okay. So here during this period, the birth rate decreased to from 37.2 in 1981 to it decreased to 21 point, write it clearly, 21.8 per thousand. This was in 2011. Okay, and death rate still declined to 7.1 per thousand. You can see the clear signs of decrease in the death rate. So in the diagram, that's why there's a huge gap over there. And the one good thing about is the compound growth rate of population, which was alarming in the previous phase from 2.14%, the compound growth rate decreased to 1.64%. This is one of the very, very positive signs that India is, even though India is still in the second stage, there is a possibility that the growth rate of population can be controlled because considerably of course, still if we have to decrease below 1%, we have a long way to go. But then from 2.14% in the previous phase to we have able to decrease the growth rate of population to 1.64%. That's a very, very positive sign. Okay. So that's why we say India, even though still in the second stage of demographic transition, there is a, what do you say, there are definite signs of slowing down. Okay, so this is how the population growth rate in our country changed. Okay, so in next class we'll check out what are all the causes and measures for overpopulation in our country. So if you find this video useful, please like, share and subscribe. And if you have any doubts or suggestions, please don't fail to mention in the comment box. Okay, so until my next class, take care. Bye bye.